right, good evening. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is John Kenyon. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature Organization, and we are the producers of the Iowa City Book Festival, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 edition. The festival is possible because of the support of sponsors and partners, and I'd like to take a moment to thank them before we get started. The City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, the Iowa City Public Library, Prairie Lights, Iowa Public Radio, the Graduate Hotel, and Think Iowa City all support the festival. And support is also provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Iowa Arts Council, which exists within the Iowa Economic Development Authority. So tonight we will hear from Bruna Dantas Lobato, a fiction writer and translator. Her translation of The Words That Remain by Stênio Gardel won the 2023 National Book Award for Translated Literature. Other translations have received the English Pen Translates Award, the Heim Translation Fund Grant, and have been longlisted for the International Dublin Literary Prize, the Pen Translation Prize, and the Republic of Consciousness Prize. Her fiction has appeared in The New Yorker, The Public Space, and The Common, and has received support from MacDowell, Yaddo, NYU, Disquiet International, and more. Her debut novel, Blue Light Hours, was published today, right? Congratulations. And we're thrilled to help her to launch this wonderful book into the world. So please help me to welcome Bruna Dantas Lobato.
Thank you all for coming. I have a cup of coffee to keep me company because I don't go anywhere without one. So from time to time, I might take a break to sip some caffeine. How are you all doing? Thank you for coming. I'm so excited. This is my first event with the book officially out in the world. So it feels very joyful. I will read a few of the opening pages, only for a few minutes. And I hope you enjoy it. So, Blue Light Hours. I arrived on campus in the middle of the night and dragged my suitcase up the stairs. Though I traveled nearly 30 hours from Brazil to get to this remote town in Vermont, I was too excited about all there was to go to sleep. Until morning, I wandered through the carpeted halls of my new house, known on campus as the Milk Carton because of its modern shape and single white gable. I read everyone's names on the colorful tags taped to the doors, visited the sparkling bathrooms with huge mirrors, tried every cabinet door, and opened the empty fridge in the kitchen downstairs, which smelled new, like food had never been in it. The rooms in my suite had identical matching pine furniture, a desk, a dresser, a bed, and a chair that rocked back slightly and scuffed the golden hardwood floors. When my suite mates arrived a week later, they covered their rooms with colorful bedspreads, folders, coasters, stickers, and soon they looked very different. One soft with throw pillows and tapestries on the wall, the other hard with crystals and handmade pottery. The scratched hardwood floors disappeared under shag rugs. They both had fridges, microwaves, electric kettles, whiteboards filled with notes hanging on the door, photos in frames and knickknacks on every surface, bits of home they brought with them or purchased online. Their rooms looked full of themselves, brimming with patterns, shapes, mementos from their lives. My own room remained woodsy, with pine in and outside the large window that looked onto a soccer field lined with trees. In my bags, I'd only been able to bring my journals, my favorite books, my clothes, small bottles of shampoo and conditioner, and a mini bar of soap to get me through the first few days. My mother gave me the red first aid kit she used to keep in her car with pain relievers and band-aids, and I stuffed it in my backpack, prepared to brave the world, even if it hurt me. Even though I had a full ride scholarship and would work 20 hours a week at the campus mailroom, I couldn't afford to buy anything that wasn't immediately useful. Only essential things to get me started from the stores listed on my International Student Orientation package: Walgreens and AT&T and Walmart, one town over. Composition notebooks, towels, a hamper, a cheap phone with a keyboard that slid out from under the screen. Besides plain white bed sheets and a pillow, the only thing I bought for the room was a desk lamp, dark blue with an adjustable neck, a bit of color standing out against all the shades of beige. When my mom called me on Skype from our apartment on the outskirts of Natal, that's what she saw. The light of that lamp, warm, always shining on me. Later, when it got cold and dark, when the whole sky filled with snow and the white walls of the room went bluish, I cherished that warmth, which I could feel in my skin when I left it on for too long. At first, we spoke every day, then 3 or 4 times a week once classes picked up and I had homework to do. I made my bed, pushed the dirty dishes left on the windowsill into a corner, and put away the clothes draped on the back of my chair ahead of our calls. I turned on my lamp, warm, and sat under the shelter of the lampshade. On my computer, I checked my own image on Photo Booth to make sure that the circles under my eyes didn't appear too deep, that there was nothing out of place in the background. Then on Skype, through our slow internet connections, my mother asked me what I was up to. I showed her my new bed sheets, my blank notebooks, my new pens. You have so much ahead of you, my mother said. The sun was setting in Natal and cast a sepia tone over the living room. Enjoy the heat for me, I said. On the other days, when I didn't stay in my room as much, I sent her pictures of myself out in the world, holding a basket of apples under an apple tree with my new friend Safia, trying on a puffer coat at the Goodwill, doing my English lit reading outside the library, and letting my legs dangle from the pier on the pond. I smiled in all the pictures. The campus looked beautiful in the fall, red and gold foliage everywhere. When I stepped on the crunchy leaves outside, I nearly forgot all the things I missed. I nearly forgot, but never fully. Safia handed me her phone so I could take pictures of her for her parents in Pakistan. She smiled with the green mountains in the background. I handed her mine so she could do the same for me. I posed, one hand on my hip, the other keeping my hair from blowing in my face. Then we sat on a bed of leaves under a maple tree to study each other's photos. How different we looked in our new clothes and boots in this golden place. 2 dorks in glasses and knockoff Uggs, I said, and she laughed. Trust me, our parents will love this, Safia said. The knee-length coats, the bright colors, the mountains, it's exactly how they imagine it. You look like you're walking on a yellow brick road, I said. She said, you look like you live in a postcard. During my first couple of weeks on campus, I kept a record of my new experiences in a notebook. Foods I ate for the first time, things I'd never seen before, phrases I didn't know, words I couldn't yet pronounce, hegemony, facetious, Worcestershire. A red barn converted into an academic building, large cups of coffee with straws, blue eggs in a bird's nest, a deer tick, I was told, crawling up my leg. I carried a notebook in my pocket and scribbled on it unabashedly during class, meals, conversations with friends, in hopes it would help me capture something about this place. I would have a fuller picture than what I could show someone through a camera, which would help me remember it later and would also help me share it with my mother. But when I read my little notebook, it turned out it mostly contained things like chipmunks aren't a cartoon invention. Why no word for them in Portuguese? Next to a full page listing types of trees, spruce, cedar, cypress, dozens of firs. I stashed it in one of my desk drawers and never opened it again, disappointed it was both too insufficient and too exhaustive. On the one hand, no place could be reduced to a catalog of foods, plants, rooms. On the other, there were too many things to name, and everything needed a shape, a texture, a color. I understood then that I'd never be able to finish telling my mother what I saw, that I would need as much time for telling as I would need for living. Still, I tried. I described to her what it felt like to walk through thick fog, to wear wool around my neck, to eat honey barbecue sauce on ribs. Do you promise me, she asked? Do you promise you'll come back in one piece? I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that reading. Wonderful start to the story. So I wanted to start out and talk a little bit about kind of the genesis of the book, and I'm just going to read a quote of yours back to you from a New York Times piece that came out recently talking about your book and Jennifer Croft and Anton Her and Lily Meyer, all translators who have debut novels out. And you had said you wanted to write the kind of novel you hadn't found yet. I see stories in between the lines of my life. I was wondering, how can we take that in and kind of use that as an overlay to the story and explain or understand rather kind of your motivation for writing this?
It's so interesting because I said so much and they quoted so little. But one thing that I was thinking of is that, while I was going through all these experiences and I was here for, a decade and then a decade and a half, and then time just kept adding up. And I kept on reading and being a big reader, is that I'd never seen an immigrant novel that showed the kind of experience that I was actually living through. And I looked for it, in American literature, but also broadly. And I fictionalized a lot. This is not exactly anything that happened to me per se, but it was still, some of the things that I saw or that I felt or that I understood. And then I externalized these scenes, I fictionalized these things so that then I could convey what I observed and what I felt and what was all around me. Like the feeling that my family would never understand what I was experiencing, that was very present for me. So I was like, okay, I got to find a way. And now I got to make my character try to convey that. So she's going to have a notebook. I didn't necessarily do things this way. So it was, in between the lines of my life in that sense that, while I was hustling in New York and doing this and that, all of these concerns were in the back of my mind. And then in the book, I make my character act them out.
Mhm. So, and you're dealing with, themes that obviously have been explored a lot in fiction, separation and leaving home and all of these things, but you're doing it particularly through a very modern lens with, you hinted or you read a little bit about that with the Skype calls and such, which makes it feel very much of its time. I was wondering if you talk a little bit about telling that kind of classic narrative, but through that new medium that we're all now very familiar with.
Yeah, as I was doing my research and I watched a lot, I love a good artsy film. And I watched Chantal Ackerman's News from Home, if anyone knows that. I love that movie. And it's just images of New York in the 70s with Ackerman's voiceover. And it's just her voice reading letters from her mom from Belgium while she's in New York. And I read and I watched, lots of stories like that. And I kept thinking, when is the FaceTime one going to come? And no one was doing it. And, long before the Zoom era, so many of us were living like this. Like I've spent so many Christmases, so many birthdays, just my head floating next to the turkey, like on the computer screen. And my aunts and cousins would walk by and like say hello to me. So it felt like if there was an interesting image there. Everyone thought it was funny just now. there's a strangeness to that I had to see. It's different from seeing a letter, like having someone's disembodied face, just someplace. In the book, my character calls that the mother, like fish tank, where she can walk away from it and come back, and her mom is always floating inside. But to address your actual question, so I was trying to figure out, okay, so I'm trying to write an internet novel. I am told those tend to be horrible and no one would read them. So I kind of made it really old fashioned in a way, in that there are no, thought bubbles or this or that. I actually describe Skype like it's a room. Like there's a halo, there's a little box, this is what it looks like. I see the glare. And I also treat the fact that the frame is so rigid that if the daughter goes a little bit outside of it, the mother will never know what her life is like outside of that frame. So I thought about it a lot as a stage. You are on stage or off stage. That's why she's cleaning, she's putting her props, she's posing things, and you can do that. Now everyone knows how to do that on Zoom. Like we have professional backgrounds, right? Like you arrange your books just so. Yeah, now everyone now is in on my little tricks that I've been doing for years. And I honestly thought the book was dead when the pandemic happened. It was like now I have nothing to reveal. Everyone already knows these things, and I was very, very lucky that I had an agent and an editor who were like, "Oh no, everyone now will understand what you're talking about. The book might not be dead just yet. It might have a second life now, a different kind of life." Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because I definitely, in reading it, felt like I could connect with it, even though my experience is not at all like your characters. But you definitely are capturing something that so many of us became intimately familiar with. That's interesting. So the story started life as a short story that was in the New Yorker, right? So how, first of all, did you envision that being something that you wanted to expand on right away? Like you could already think that? Or how did that process unfold for you?
Yeah, so that story in the New Yorker was the genesis of the book, but by the time the story was in the New Yorker, I already pretty much had the book. It's just that the story was what the book came out of that story. But publishing is so slow, as I'm sure some of you know. By the time the book is out today, I mean, I've actually been done with it for almost 2 years now, and I had to read it again, like the rest of it. Like, what was it that I said? Yeah, so I did know that it was going to be a book, but I was still, I think, a little bit in the trenches, that I had to find a way. I was this close, but I had yet to pull it off. I was like, how on earth is this going to feel like a book? It was still a little amorphous. And yeah, so I was working on it. The piece in the New Yorker came out. I suddenly had a little bit more pressure to finish it. It would still take me 2 more years. I'm a very slow writer. So, 2 more years of working and reshaping, and I wrote a few more chapters in that time. But a lot of it was just honestly staring at the page, moving things around. And then I only wrote the very, very last chapter, the last few images, last summer. And that's when I knew that, oh, I'm done. And then we sent it out to editors and all of that. And pretty much the editors didn't move anything after that. Like it kind of stayed the way it was. And I think I don't know. I could be someone else's experience could be completely different, but there's so much pressure for us to write quickly. I would like to be the one person saying sometimes it pays to write very slowly, and that I kind of let the writing crystallize, and I would only show it to people when I felt really certain that I had something that was very, very polished. I'm a perfectionist. So yeah, and then it kind of worked out that this way. But some of the earlier scenes, including a couple of the things I just read, I actually wrote for the first time 10 years ago. So very slow. I was a baby writer then.
You obviously did something right if it's still in the book. So what I wanted to talk a little bit later about your translation work, but I wonder, you're talking about the book not really being touched by the editor. Is some of that maybe a function of the fact that you had studied the form of a novel, perhaps more, obviously you studied creative writing and such, but also just by translating the work of other folks, you have really gotten into the literal nuts and bolts of novels, maybe in a way that other folks haven't, and know how they should be structured? Is that something that informs that?
I don't know that I know it any better than other writers or translators. That's like a very bold claim. But I will say that a feature of the style of the book is that every word does need to be carefully placed just so. So it's not the kind of book that, you could delete a scene and the book will still be left standing. It was I wanted to craft a book that was kind of very meticulously thought through. That makes it, I think, a different editing experience maybe than if I had like a doorstopper novel or something like that. Maybe it might be more a feature of that. But I will say that being a translator did make me a good, rigorous reader and editor of my own work, attuned to sound and to narrative and the ups and downs of a story. It definitely helped me in that sense. Is translation the only way to get there? No, but it was my way of getting there.
Sure, that makes sense. And you didn't say it, I did, so you're covered.
You heard him, wasn't me?
So one thing I was struck by, and probably because of where I am in my life with, kids, I've got a kid that just went off to college. And so a lot of what you're writing about, I'm experiencing from the mom's side of things, but also dealing with parents and having to take care of them, that, notion of the donut generation. And in some ways, it feels like that informs your book, even though the mom doesn't have a mother to take care of because of things that transpire in the book. But it feels like that notion of being a generation kind of caught between very much informs what you're writing about. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, yes. And it was important to me that she thought the mother character thought a lot about the mother that she had to take care of, and that my character worried about taking care of her own mother. And I thought of it as like mothering in more than one direction. And I did a lot of role reversal. Like sometimes the daughter will behave like a mother, will say motherly things like she will say to her mother, "Are you taking care of yourself? Have you been taking your medicine? Let me read you a story to sleep." I wanted to play with that a lot because I think a big part of growing up is first realizing your parents are human and very fallible and they can get sick and they say wrong things and they're also lonely and suffering and all of that. But also seeing a parent grow old, you really see the fragility of that and how isolating, like it makes you feel both. I feel like utterly helpless, like very much like a child that there's nothing that can be done. But also I feel very ancient too, that I am now, the age my mom was while I was like running around and bothering her. So yeah, that was important to me. Caretaking is a very important concern in the book, and community, keeping people company. Yeah, so I was definitely thinking of several generations of women taking care of one another like that.
And also the frustration of trying to do that at remove as you deal with in this book. So I was wondering if I could get you to read another short passage here. I was really taken, it was page 124. And we talked about this a little bit, or corresponded about this. It was one particular line on the next page that felt to me like kind of a real emotional center for the story that you were telling. Just like that section that starts toward the bottom of 124.
Just the one paragraph, or tell me where it ends again. You told me, but I forget.
That's all right. I would go toward the break on 126 if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
I want to make you do a bunch of extra work, but
No, I mean, listen, I would be happy to just read the book and not say another word. Uh, after a couple of weeks staying up all night, I realized one morning before bed that I'd stopped noticing the birds. Is that the one?
yes.
I had gotten used to them, the way I got used to everything eventually, by incorporating them into my routine until they're a part of the stuff of life. What kept me up now was habit, not need. By then, the summer was almost over. I'd already started preparing to stay for my second year, and it seemed like somehow I had made the decision without even realizing it. I went ahead and ordered half of my class materials and illegally downloaded the other half as PDFs. I borrowed a couple of long novels from the library to read ahead of time before I got too busy and ended up never reading them. I started going to sleep earlier and earlier each night, so I'll be alert for society during the day by the time classes began. I told my mother, "Now that I finally got used to this house, it's time to leave." "Such a beautiful house," she said. "Such a shame." "I could see myself living here," I said. "I could see myself becoming the person I want to be, an independent woman who doesn't call her mommy in the middle of the night, perhaps." "Ha ha," she said, and smiled in the dark, her face glowing with the light from the screen. "And who would that person call instead?" "No one," I yelled into the mic. "No one at all. But we always needed someone on the other end of the line, didn't we? A warm voice to put us to sleep and also to keep us awake. Chirping birds, the radio, the books." Then the sound of something shattering broke through the speakers and brought my attention back to the screen. Can I keep going?
Yeah, you could probably stop
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
actually, because that's where we were getting. And I thank you very much for reading that. And it was that sentence, and I want to make sure I get it right, but it says, "We always needed someone on the other end of the line, didn't we? And it feels like that's, if you had to sum up what this book was about in some ways, for me as a reader, it felt like that. And particularly the notion that the student who had left home is starting to feel comfortable. I mean, you allude to that in the very beginning of that section, starting to maybe feel at home a little bit, but at the same time feeling the pull. I don't even know where I'm formulating a question with that, but it just really felt like that was the center of the book for me. So maybe just if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, now I've been doing more reading like this, and I've been getting responses from people that the passages apparently I choose are the very sad ones. They're my favorite. But and then people are like, so she's just incredibly lonely. This is like suffocating. And to me, yes, it is very much about loneliness, but it is about companionship as well, just staying with somebody in the dark, talking. We know digital intimacy, like talking with someone, sitting there while you eat a meal, you prop up the phone and you just kind of do that. And it is very insufficient. We feel sometimes even lonelier at the end. But that exercise, like when I'm alone at home, I will listen to the radio, like the character does here. Or I will sometimes, now that I'm traveling a lot and I'm in a lot of hotel rooms, I sometimes just let the TV play whatever. I've watched Home Alone like 3 times already this year. But it's just something to kind of just some sound, just some ambient noise, just something to keep you company that way. And now that I've been writing inscriptions to people, I've been saying sometimes, like when people are like, "Oh, I felt lonely like this," I will tell them, "I hope the book will keep you company," and it is very much my hope.
Thank you for indulging me on that. I appreciate it. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about your translation work. You are a very prolific translator. How does that differ from the work that you're doing with your own work? I mean, I know literary translation is an incredibly creative process where you are the one putting the words onto the page, but it's different than ideas that are coming out of full cloth out of your head. So how does that differ, and how do you kind of approach that work as opposed to writing your own fiction?
I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to step into other voices and other characters and other styles that are not always anything like my own. And I get to do that all the time, that I get to try being really fast paced. I've been even plotty on occasion and, written car crashes and like big scenes. And I've enjoyed doing that. But then I would go back to my own writing and it felt like this one place where I could try my hand at something that I had never gotten the chance to do and that I haven't seen anyone else do. And also to ask the questions that maybe only I could ask. And then I kept going back to this very personal place of, what is it that keeps me up at night? What is it that I keep observing all around me that I haven't heard anywhere else say, and I want to hear it. A lot of the dialogue I have in this book came from other friends, international students that I came of age with, and what they would tell me about their parents as well. And, all of the things that they would tell me, like, oh, my mom does this or my mom does that, or, I have to stay here for winter break again. And all of us would be like, yes. And I don't even think the other students knew that some of us were staying behind a lot of the time. So, it felt like we had this like whisper network. We all knew we had these experiences in common. No one wanted to say out loud. It's kind of inconvenient to say there are all of us here speaking in accents and living our lives. Like we are Vermont residents too. Like no one wants to think about that. So yeah, it was this one space where I could very much be myself. And for years, because also I'm such a slow writer, for years I wasn't even thinking of publishing any of it. I just wanted to be able to say it somewhere. It was like almost life affirming that this happened, this is real, we're here, and we've been talking about these things.
So one thing I was interested to note was that you did the Portuguese translation of your own book. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process. That must have been somewhat surreal.
It was horrendous. I didn't want to do it. Let me just say that. I didn't want to do it. It felt like a bad idea. And like it could consume me and go nowhere, and I would waste my time and I would have a bad book because I have too much information. But the thing is that having translated so many other books kind of prepared me to treat this as a book, not just as my own work. That so I wasn't editing it or thinking, oh, what was I thinking that day? I treated as a text on the page. What is on the page? What do I see being performed here? And then I would do just that. And then I didn't correct anything, I didn't change anything. And I did my best iteration of what to me was important in the book, the moodiness, the atmosphere, the loneliness, the empty space on the page, that was marking the mother's absence. I just tried to approach it from that perspective as someone else's book. And then I had to do it very quickly because I had a deadline. So I do it maybe 2 or 3 months, pretty much full time. And I'm very proud of the result. And in the end, the reason why the editors wanted me to do it and that everyone was pushing me to do it is because I do speak in Portuguese. I also have an accent. I speak a very regional dialect of Portuguese, so not the dominant Portuguese on TV. And we got samples from other translators, and they made the character sound like she was of a different race and social background so completely, and it was so jarring to me to see that. Those of you who know, I got translators who are Gaúcho or from Rio, and I'm from Natal, up north by the equator. And it was such a disconcerting experience of displacement all over again. And I was like, yeah, fine, I'll do it. And then another reason that I wanted to do it, by then I was pretty convinced that there was a need for it. Then it started to feel right. After the scaries went away, it started to feel right because it started to feel like a bit of a homecoming. I haven't been able to live in Brazil for a long time, not since I was a teenager, and I haven't been able to write in Portuguese, and I've always dreamed of it, but oh, I'm never good enough, I'll never have the time. There's always some kind of obstacle, but then I did get to do it. I did get to write the book in Portuguese. And then once that was done, it felt like it was always meant to be a double book. It was always meant to, have its mirror. In early versions of it, I even called it Two Lives because to me, I thought of it as an immigrant novel that is not just about moving forward to your new life in America, but also always gesturing back, a life where you kind of don't let go of the other one. And you have this compulsion to be in two places at once, to live two lives at once. So now it gets to have two lives as well.
That feels like a good place for me to end on, but we have plenty of time for folks in the audience to ask questions, and I think Wendy is going to be coming around with a microphone here. So if you do have a question, maybe raise your hand and wait for the microphone to be in hand so that it is audible to everyone else. So does anybody have any questions?
Did you say you lived in Vermont when you were?
I did. I lived in Vermont for 4 years, and the book is set in Vermont.
Oh wow! And so you lived in the lowest crime rate state in the U.S.
I used to. Now I live in Iowa.
Oh, now, well, you lived. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And all the maple syrup there.
Yeah.
Did they have? I'm gonna have to. And how long were you in Brazil when you were in Brazil? You took away you took from America that you were saying that the Thanksgiving for the turkey when you were on your mind and brought with you to your culture.
No, so we don't have Thanksgiving in Brazil.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, and the turkey but we have a very similar dinner type of thing, like we'll eat similar foods, our own version of a harvest in a way, and we do that during Christmas time. So on the Christmas Eve, that evening, we have a big turkey dinner. And I don't actually include any of that. My characters eat ramen on Christmas.
That's interesting.
It's a lonely, kind of depressing Christmas party they're having.
Yeah, you said turkey dinner, but you don't actually eat turkey dinner.
No, people do. It's just not in my book. But normally, yes, you have like a big dinner. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question.
Hi, thank you so much for the reading and conversation. I'm really curious about the translation into Portuguese. I'm curious, first of all, whether it's been published and it's been like received in Brazil, and who you see as your audience there. you know, considering like the fact that like you're writing for people here who have this experience, who are you writing for back home?
That is such a good question. I'm like, nobody. So it comes out in Brazil, beginning of March, so it hasn't come out yet. But I guess I have no idea how it's going to be received. I think it's going to be a bit of a surprise because I feel so much like an outsider there, the same way that I feel like an outsider here, I guess, to some extent. But one thing that I'm thinking about is that Brazil has a very complicated relationship with the United States, as many a country does. And I'm thinking I'm gonna show a very different version of what they might expect. Not very glittery. The mother here maybe might be some kind of hint towards an audience that I might have. There's a chapter where she's like, what do you mean your life is boring? You live in the movies. And the daughter is like, this is a really bad movie. This is an actual line in the book. So I'm hoping that there will be a sense of that, of an understanding of what is it like to be an immigrant? What is it like to be a Brazilian abroad? When suddenly now you have to carry this label. In Brazil, I was never thinking, oh gosh, I'm Brazilian, you know? So an awareness of that. What is it like when you move from a space to another space and your body is perceived so differently? I guess I am just calling them back on Skype and being like, gosh, you guys have no idea what it's like over here. Yeah, but I don't know. I will have to report back. We'll see if it gets good reviews.
Another question? That's probably a silly question, but is it true that there is no Portuguese word for chipmunks?
It's just squirrel. You say squirrel for both squirrel and for chipmunk. There is one, like a very scientific one,
Oh, okay.
so that you wouldn't use colloquially, but if you really want to be specific, you can say like a very Latin term. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've Googled this as I was writing it.
It's kind of an abstract question because I know everyone's writing process is different, but just in terms of like while you write, you have so many moments of like, this is going to be terrible and so much doubt. How do you personally feel like you're able to move past some of those moments and really encourage yourself like, no, this is something like we can finish and we can actually do this?
I mean, you never know for sure, right? But getting yourself through that doubt or past that doubt has so much to do with having this inner fire. You just kind of have to believe that the project is worth it. I have a student now who was just talking to me about wanting to be a writer, and I was like, "Oh, are you considering MFAs?" And she's like, "I don't know that I'm stubborn enough." And that has stayed with me. And I was like, oh, yes, I am really stubborn. If someone tells me I can't do something, I will prove them wrong. So much so that taped next to my desk, I have give them hell, so that I can, just out of spite, prove everyone that I've ever studied with who told me that you couldn't write a good internet novel, or that I couldn't write an immigrant novel that is not of this kind or that kind, that I could show them. But there must be a way to tell a story about this kind of person. It can't be true, for example, that every novel needs to have some kind of hero and some kind of huge discovery, like, so just trying to make a point, and you got to be stubborn enough to want to make that point. But on a more micro scale, on my day to day, when I'm just like, okay, I don't know how to write the next sentence and I don't know how to move forward in that sense, I would sometimes just take a break, because I've tried willing myself to write, like, just do it, go ahead and do it. And then it doesn't work. I'm very anxious and I'm stressed. And then, the writing is bad and I feel bad. I go ahead and read a book, or I go for a walk, I translate. And then I remember, oh, yes, I love the words. And, a line of dialogue will get stuck in my head again. Allowing myself to do that. There was a time when I wouldn't allow myself to go read or do anything until I was done with a chapter. Now I don't do that kind of self-punishing behavior anymore. I enjoy the books, I go read them.
Good question.
In a way, it's about cultivating a writing life, isn't it? I mean, it's not just writing, but cultivating a writing life. I've been so impressed by how you have proceeded both as this incredibly industrious and very successful translator, and now you have your debut novel, and I'm sure that many will follow. But it's about cultivating a writing life, right? I mean, the books around you and the translations.
Absolutely. And having a community to do that with also is very, very helpful. Having other people who don't think you're insane for spending your life doing this kind of thing. Yeah. Question?
Bruna, hearing you talk about your writing process and your perfectionism and your meticulousness, of course, brings to mind that you are famously a maker of miniatures. And could you talk about, I just love hearing you talk about making miniatures, but also does that play into your writing process at all? And did you happen to miniaturize any of the interiors of your novel?
Such a good question. So yes, so for the uninitiated, I make doll houses in 1 to 12 scale miniatures. I love doing that. I had a wonderful therapist here in Iowa City who told me to get a hobby because I was so obsessed with the writing that I was just kind of spinning my wheels working on the same scene forever. She was like, go do something else. And I was about to say her name. Let me not do that. Just thinking. So, but I'm grateful to anybody who'll be like, maybe I think it's important to try to build a healthy writing practice. And sometimes we need help in order to do that. Could be from a professor, from a friend. So I had this wonderful doctor. And so she made me make a list of things I used to do as a kid that I really loved doing. And I remembered I used to make these popsicle stick houses with my mom. So it turns out now I have much better motor skills. So my doll houses now, my miniatures are much more detailed, very realistic. I would like to have you see a picture and not know if it's a real room or a miniature. And that feels like an exercise in fiction writing. That people are like, well, I can't believe this happened to you. I'm like, it didn't. Right. And I am like, I can't believe this room is real. And I'm like, but it isn't real. It's all artifice. So there's that sense of it that I'm fictionalizing. And then there's the other thing that I quickly learned. I mean, this is a book that's very interested in homes and interiors and spaces, American homes in particular, but in general, right? Like what can I glean just by looking at this tiny little window I get? And I quickly found out making my own interiors that you can't have an interior without having a person, a mind that's making decisions about it. So if there's a cup on the table, if there's a book in the corner, there needs to be a character. So I was constantly imagining these things. Like I have little magazines and I have like crossword puzzles and a tiny, 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 teeny, tiny pen. And I was having so much fun making it. And it was also how I took my breaks. And I would be like carving this tiny utensil or like making a tiny French press. And then I would go back to the page, understanding a little bit more about a chair. Like how does a chair get worn? How do you hold this object? Why do you put it there? Does it matter if it's, weighty or not? I mean, the things I've discovered, if anyone here works with fabrics, you will know how difficult of a material it is. I was making like tiny upholstery. You have to pick up all kinds of random skills. So tiny upholstery is one of them if you want to have any couches at all. So I was making armchairs and then I was trying to make curtains. It's a little bit like writing that you think you can just replicate like it is in real life and then it doesn't work. So if you just put the fabric there, the fabric is going to be kind of like stiff. So you have to weigh it down so that it mimics the weight of a life-sized curtain. And then it can kind of like, stand all the way to the bottom. So I would dip it in watered down glue, etc. Like all these things. With fiction, it's a little bit like that. We are playing with time, we're playing with texture, right? So that it feels like it's real. You can't just borrow it wholesale from life. It's very interesting that in writing classes, when I did try to borrow some things from real life, the professors would be like, but in fiction, it can't be that way, even though it happens in real life. In fiction, it needs to have this other point, or that's too extreme, because then it's a hand making that happen to a character, as opposed to just real life, which is nonsensical. So like you're being cruel to your characters. even though that happened to you. So that kind of understanding, I was thinking about that all the time. It's like, I have to be so deliberate in my choices. Can't borrow from life wholesale. You need to have a purpose. And also there is a mind operating and making these choices. But most importantly, when I could talk about the scuffing on the floor in my own house, if I had a chair, I needed to scuff the floor where the chair goes. Otherwise, it doesn't look realistic. It looks like I just put that chair there, right? So making things worn, and like if you use this object a lot, it needs to have patina. I had so much fun wearing things down, both on the page and with the miniatures.
I would really like to see a tiny little chipmunk that has entered the house.
One of my doll houses does have a tiny pet rabbit, modeled after my own pet rabbit, Sweet Tulipa.
Is there somewhere we can see these? Do you have pictures on your
Yeah, I
website?
can pictures, Wendy. I can show you.
I'd love to see them. Any other questions?
I have an Instagram account, but don't know. If you're on social media, you can see them there. Otherwise, I'll just show them to you.
Any other questions before I give the mic back to John? And then John, you'll ask the last one?
Sure. Do you have any inspiration or ideas for anyone who's trying to write more? I have a job that doesn't encourage a lot of that, so I have to try to make time. So do you have any recommendations for that?
That's a good question. I mean, my partner is here and he knows how much I complain about writers. A lot of writers don't have jobs and I am so jealous. So I'm complaining about that all the time. I'm like, why don't I have all the time in the world to just go to France and walk around? I have many jobs. So my main advice for that is to make room for yourself, be really self-indulgent is sometimes the way that I think about it. I feel guilty to take time away from family, from friends, from my many duties, sacrifice that to be able to do this. But it is the same way that, you shower, that you brush your teeth and you make time for those things for maintenance. I would try to think about writing that way. I was like, if I lose this, I'm kind of losing my lifeline. And I try to respect it that way. Sometimes the only way for me to do it was to get out of my chores in my house where I knew I had things to do and I had to load the dishwasher, etc. A couple times I would check into like a B&B or something. Here I stayed at the Phillips Historic House a couple times just because it was a nice place to be. And then I could forget about my problems for a little bit.
So you're talking about carving out time and space and headspace really for work. So what's the next thing that will result from all of that work? What can we watch for next from you?
I'm like trying to get through the week, but I have a couple of translations that I have to finish by the beginning of next year. And I have a few coming out in the spring that I've already finished ages ago as it goes. Yeah, and I'm also, trying to go back to being humble and honest with myself, not having great ambitions, not being like, I'm gonna write a huge novel, great writing now. Just like I'm gonna shoot the shit and I'm gonna see what comes of it. Like I'll write a couple lines and then I'll report back if they become anything, and it's also okay if they don't.
Well, we're glad that this turned into something. It's a wonderful novel. I encourage everyone to
you.
pick it up. Help me thank Bruna for spending time with us. So Prairie Lights would be more than happy to sell you a copy of her book, or we have one of her translations up here, and I'm sure she would be happy to meet you and sign that as well. So thank you again for coming out.
Thank you.
Many more book festival events to come, including some yet tonight. So thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you, John.